Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week is a special episode. I'm releasing it on Father's Day. Father's Day if you're in the UK, like I am. And in previous episodes of the podcast, you may have heard me speaking about my dad at certain times. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. But other episodes are normally a bit more light than this, but basically my dad died of cancer about 5 years ago. So I thought it would be nice to have my brother Rob on here, and talk to him about, well, dad, really, kind of remembering dad. Now, at the start, we just talk about sort of what it was like growing up with dad, sort of how he was, the kind of personality he was. At the start, it may sound like we're kind of putting him down a little bit, maybe to some people, but he wasn't a perfect man. I say it numerous times in the podcast. He is a great man, and I loved him dearly, and I really miss him. But that doesn't mean he was perfect. And the kind of point of me releasing this, something so personal and something that can be quite intense. So I do want to warn people, we do talk about cancer. So if that's something that will really emotionally affect you negatively, I don't want anyone to feel really uncomfortable while they're listening to this. But we wanted it to be honest and open and show that it's okay to miss people, and for when they pass away to speak about them honestly and not necessarily make a saint out of them. You can't learn from people's errors if you think they were perfect, and that's especially a thing I think parents are quite integral for children to do. You look at your parents, you see what the good parts of them are, and you think, I want to be like that. But you also look at their flaws and think, okay, how do I want to improve upon that? So we do get into, I'd say, if you're going to listen to this podcast, if you start listening to it and you think they're kind of slagging off their dad a little bit, I would really recommend just listening to the whole thing, because it does kind of come back round. We start at the start, it talks about getting to know dad, and then as we got older, what it was like, because my brother Rob is 17 years older than I am, and we sort of get into the different dynamics and things of that, because I was 19 when dad passed, whereas Rob was in his sort of mid to late 30s. And we talk about sort of when he got cancer, when he told us what it was sort of like dealing with a parent or family member or anyone close to you with cancer. We spoke about his passing. I don't go into ridiculously graphic detail in that, but I do mention a specific sort of the last moment I sort of saw him and stuff, so that could be, it was quite emotional, obviously, so just another sort of warning about that. And then we talk about, towards the end of the podcast, we kind of talk about, sort of what you can do with family members if they're going through this sort of thing, as in, if you know someone and someone they're close to is terminal with cancer, what you can kind of do for them in a sense. But obviously me and Rob aren't saying that we know everything. We're not saying all this will work for everyone, and this isn't some sort of podcast as a cure-all for these sorts of things. It's just, it's kind of a way for me to vent, in a sense. It's quite an emotion, obviously it's an emotional thing, and for me and Rob to talk about, so it's quite nice to kind of talk it out and get that out there. It gives context to the podcast if there's certain episodes that I've done in the past, and if you've listened to them, heard me talk about dad, especially in last week's one where I speak with Jack about me and both our dads had died. So it's to give some context to that, it's to help me in that way, and I'm just hoping that anyone who is either going through this or has been through this or anything like that, it'll bring them some degree of closure or help in any way. If this podcast helps one individual get through something like this, then that would make me happy. I just want people to realise that you don't have to make a saint out of someone who's passed away. It's okay, being angry or being sad or anything like that. And I just want this to be a sort of honest, vulnerable show, in a sense. I try to be as honest as I can with all these podcasts. I want to be open as I can about details surrounding myself. Obviously, I don't want to talk about sort of people who've been close to me in the past, who maybe aren't in my life anymore. I don't want to go into their sort of details, but obviously that's not really expected of me, and that's certainly not what's going to be going on in this podcast. Just as a little pretense as well, just to clarify, I mentioned about brothers and stuff in previous podcasts, and I've mentioned my brother Justin, who may be on in the future at some point, I don't know. But basically, for full clarity, because people might get a little bit confused if they're not sure, my dad married a woman called Joy before I was born, had 2 children with them, which my brother Rob and another brother of mine called Chris. I spoke to Chris, he wasn't that fussed about being on there, so obviously I didn't want to force him or make him uncomfortable by coming on here. Some people just don't like being on podcasts and venting all this sort of emotional stuff out, which is 100% okay. And then we have a brother called Justin, because Rob married a woman called Catherine. Her brother is Justin. He's a few years older than me, and all of us as we treat him like a brother, because he's a brother not only in law, but he's also with family, and family doesn't necessarily have to be blood. I have many friends close to me who I'd consider family, that sort of thing as well. So just for full disclosure, if anyone was a bit confused, they've heard previous podcasts where I've mentioned someone called Justin, who's my brother. That's what it is. Rob and Chris are my half brothers. Justin is technically brother-in-law, but I don't like that sort of labelling and all that crap and saying they're half brothers and all that. It's way too much effort. And yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling on now because it's almost 5 minutes and stuff, but I just wanted to give some sort of context to this. And I want to say, if anyone is going through anything like this, and they want anyone to talk to, then I'm saying, you can check myself out on social media and things like that. You don't have to follow me or anything like that. If you just send me a message either via email or anything like that, I'm the only person who does anything to do with genuine chit chat, essentially, social media side, anything like that. It's all me. So if you did want to talk about anything like this, you want to send me a message or anything, I would be the only person to see that, and I would obviously keep it completely confidential if anyone is going through anything and wanted anyone to talk to in any way. So that's it really. I'll be back at the end, just a very minor thing of what's coming up next. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoy this podcast. It was obviously a very special one to me and to Rob, and yeah, I'm just going to let it sort of go on. So thank you as always for listening, guys, and I'll be back at the end. Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. My phone's on silent too, but it still will vibrate and go off because I'm so fucking popular. Not really, but
Peter Gabriel song.
Sorry?
Peter Gabriel song.
What?
She's so popular.
I know the Peter Gabriel song, Sledgehammer, and what's the song that he goes, that's a show. The video's loads of people bleeding and stuff.
Oh yeah, is that called The Show? I think it might be.
It's either called The Show, it's called The Something, a name of someone's show.
Yeah, that's the latest stuff with all the theatrical things he did, yeah.
It's so weird because you see Sledgehammer and the video to that song is amazing, and the video to the other song's really good, but he looks completely different. He looks like his own dad.
There's one called Digging Up the Dirt, which they made him make it because Sledgehammer was so popular. So it almost sounds the same, and it's got a very similar video. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Is that what you want to get to when you're big enough, when you're in a band that's big enough? You'll be so big that you actually have the corporations. That's when you know you've made it, when the corporations are trying to change your sound.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, I already started recording, because that's what I do in podcasting. I suddenly do it. Hey guys, this is a special episode of Genuine Chit Chat. I've probably mentioned and talked to death and rambled on in the intro, which I'll obviously be recording after this. I'm here with my brother Rob, and we're basically going to talk about Dad a bit. As people may know from the previous episodes, if you've listened to them, I've mentioned in passing about Dad. I've had a few conversations with people about Dad in some way or another, and so I thought it'd be kind of nice in a sense, as a good thing for memory, and also for people to kind of have the full story of basically talking about Dad and my brother. So that's what we're going to do. Just as a pretense, Dad died of cancer 5 years ago, so that's one of the reasons why. But we'll get into all that sort of stuff eventually. But obviously, Rob, you're what, 17 years older than me?
Yeah, nearly 18, aren't I?
Yeah, because I think it was when I was 17. I remember you saying you were double my age. That's how I remember. That's how I remember your age. I know your birth year, because the keypad to Dad's old office was your birth year. So I remember that, and I also remember you're 17 years older than me. So
I'm the favourite son, so I got the keypad duties. Look at that. That's how you know.
That is true. I didn't get that.
And I'm not the oldest son, so you know what I mean?
Exactly. You were the middle son, and you got the keypad. So it's like, that's how you know you're the favourite.
I peaked too early, didn't I?
That was it. That was the pinnacle of your life, where Dad started his company. But so I was gonna say, like, our dad was, obviously we both loved him, and he was a brilliant man in all kinds of ways. He wrote, he wrote 2 books, The Pearl Necklace and The Hampshire Triangle, which one of them was like so graphic that the church, there's like a rape scene in front of a church in St Mary's, and the church made a big fuss about it.
The vicar of St Mary's condemned it, so they took it off the They refused to have it on the shelves in Southampton, I think.
That's amazing. And then I remember seeing, he was so proud when he showed me a newspaper front of him holding the book up. And he was like, look, everyone got so outraged by it. And he just found it hilarious.
Yeah, I think it sold a few extra copies because obviously people are interested.
Well, yeah, exactly. It was like Auntie Beryl. She could read like 7 pages of it. She said it was too much for her, too vulgar or something.
It is pretty weird.
Have you read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Really? Have you read both of them?
Yes.
How are they of interest? Like,
they're pretty good, and he writes well, and his descriptions are quite blunt, and it flows very easily. I was very proud of that, and I was very pleased. But he's a bit weird. There's a lot of stuff about pawn shops and some sort of stepdad fancying his own stepdaughter and things. It's quite twisted and strange. And you keep thinking this is weird, and then you think, oh, my dad wrote this. Is even weirder. You don't want to think about your parents having sex, let alone talking about weird kind of slightly incestual things. It's pretty odd. Yeah,
that can be an odd thing, but I don't know. I haven't written a book, so I wouldn't know how far to delve deep into the weirdness. But he also he painted a little bit, but that wasn't like a main thing. He was in a few bands when he was younger, especially. Obviously, it was Noddy Croak where he did the last gig of. And obviously, he had 3 kids while he was alive. There's 4 grandkids. But he's still only 4. I haven't got any at the moment, but that I know of. Hopefully not. But he did a lot with his life. He seemed to kind of just. I think it's kind of rubbed off on you and me a bit in the sense like you're in 3 bands at the moment.
Yeah.
You're in 3 bands. You're planning on writing. Well, you've written like a sitcom. There's a radio play. You spoke to me the other day about a couple of children's books. I also do podcasting. I did music videos. That's kind of it at the moment. But I wrote part of a book almost trying to, and I tried playing guitar for about 2 weeks. Then gave up because I'm useless. But it was always quite inspiring because Dad was just like, I'm just going to do this thing, and he pretty much always would. That was, well, from what I could tell, maybe he just said he was going to do a lot of shit and didn't. But when he was young, before I was around, like when obviously we have different mums, so when Dad was around when you were younger, how was he? Because I'll say how I remember him when I was a lot younger. When you were like 10 and stuff, I remember he threw a tape at Chris's head once, which is our other brother.
Yeah, a video, not like a cassette.
No, not a cassette.
A VHS tape.
Yeah, I remember hearing
Chris
about that.
never learnt to not make him angry when he was holding stuff. He hit him with a plug once.
A plug?
Because that's what he was holding. I think I got slapped on the leg once, but Chris was always a lot worse behaved than I am.
Yeah, that is definitely Chris.
I might have been the pain's awkward son in most families, but with our older brother, obviously, I was the easier one. Yeah. So
you also went to like a little choir boy for a little while as well. Did that influence? Did you seem like a better person from that?
I don't think so. I used to help run the church youth club, didn't I, for something to do because we used to just use the youth club.
Yeah,
But Dad wasn't really interested in that, and obviously Dad didn't live with me then, so
yeah.
I don't think that side of things affected. He was always quite grumpy, and he was always quite short-tempered, but he was always very happy doing. If he was doing what he wanted to do, or you were doing something that he liked or respected, he was always a bit narrow-minded, maybe, but he absolutely was obsessed and full-on about the things that he did like.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to convince him to like other things, but unless he found it himself. But when I was a kid, he would, if you were doing what he wanted to do, like family things, like cool things like playing tennis and as a family or doing those sorts of things, he would always really enjoy that, and he'd be very positive.
Yeah.
And obviously anything to do with music, he was always really up for you. You know, Chris used to play the keyboard a bit and things like that when he was younger, and Dad really liked that, you know.
Yeah, Dad always. The only reason I really play keyboard was because Dad wanted me to do something, and obviously, it's funny when I was younger because I was in the Cubs and the Scouts and the Explorers, which none of that I really enjoyed that much. No, and I did sailing for a while. I did a lot of stuff at Fairthorn Manor, you know, doing outdoorsy stuff. Even though I was a very overweight Jew-fro, very overweight, very unathletic, and very sarcastic and a know-it-all. And now I've gotten older, I'm happy I could do all those things because now I'm really into all that sort of stuff.
But you say now you got older, you haven't got a Jew-fro.
Well, yeah, I haven't got a Jew-fro. Unfortunately, my driver's license photo still has me with a Jew-fro, and I point it out to people whenever no one gets a giggle from if it's a female in a shop or something and I get ID'd. It's like, well, this is embarrassing because I have a beard. I couldn't grow this beard when I was like 17, but here's a picture of me while I look 17 because that's when I got my driver's provisional, and I just didn't change the photo because I just looked the exact same from the age of like, you know, probably 13, 14 till about 19. And then I was like, I'm going to change my hair a little bit, about 4 times. And then my passport photo, cousin Charlotte says I look like a Russian paedophile in it. So that's good.
Specific there.
It is specific, but that's what our family's like, isn't it? Nice specific insults. But yeah, with Dad, I remember him being. He was an old git sometimes. Obviously, I got him obviously about 20 years later. I do remember it being. I don't know if you had it with your dynamic with your mum, but I had it where it was like he would always have. He wouldn't have one opinion on something. It would just be whenever you catch him. It would be like he would say no to something, not even because he didn't want you to do it, but because you got him at the wrong time. If you get him at the right time, he would just say yes to almost anything. I kind of got that.
Yeah, I suppose so. Mornings were a nightmare because he would just be so miserable in the mornings and such hard work. You just have to stay out of his way.
Yeah.
I think I only got hit by him once or twice, but it was in the morning, whether it was once or twice. But
yeah,
and I was just basically stood in the bathroom in the way. I didn't really do anything wrong. And he's just. And I think I'm bad in the mornings. I think I don't randomly smack people that are in my way generally as a rule.
I think I was always out of the house before him and I had to get up, so I didn't have to deal with him in the mornings, fortunately. And normally in the weekend mornings, he would just be in bed with a newspaper and loads of biscuits, so he'd be all right in that sense. But yeah, I'd find. I remember once. It was a couple of weird things with him. But this was more so when I was a teenager as well. When I was dating the first girlfriend. We used to sleep on the double bed in the guest room, and my dad would have such a massive fuss about that, but Mum would be alright with it. And then I only found out years later, I think years after he passed away, that Dad with your mum cheated on her quite a lot, from what we know. And it was just like, you wouldn't let me sleep with my girlfriend who I'm with, even though it would happen anyway. He'd make such a fuss about it. And I was like, can I just get a double bed? Because the guest bedroom is next to my parents' bedroom, and my bedroom's on the other side of the house. And my dad would always make such a fuss about it, and Mum had to convince him. I was just like, you're not stopping anything. You should know this. Like, what? But then I would just show up. I would go home one day because I was going to buy the double bed, and then they just showed up one day and it was there. And it was like, something similar happened with an Xbox. I asked if I can get an Xbox. I was like, if I pay half of it, could I have the other half as a Christmas present or birthday present or something? And then Dad made a bit of a fuss about it, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll just save up for it. And then the next day, he just bought me one. And I was very grateful for that opportunity, and I was very, very thankful that I kind of had that sort of thing with him. But it was very bizarre, and there didn't seem to be a lot of logic. I mean, I remember you telling me about the sofa thing.
Yeah, because obviously, because I wanted to borrow £30, didn't I? Well, so I went to his work and he just stammering at me. I said, I just need to borrow £30 to the end of the week. A man that owns his own company, and he's like, I can't get the money out right now. I said, I can see the cash book from your window. It's only across the road. I know it's a busy road, but. And then it was just ridiculous. In the end, I just said, oh, don't worry about it. And I said, I just won't eat this week, and I just stormed out. And then 2 months later, he just randomly bought me a new 2-piece suite for about £1,400 or something, and it's just like, but you wouldn't give me 30 quid for a week. But if it's his idea,
yeah,
he'd see something out that he would think that you liked, he'd buy it, and it could be anything, and it could be, you might have got a Rolex, you might have got a Rolls Royce when you were 12, I don't know, but do you know what I mean? But you might not have, given you 20p to go and get some sweets because it was your idea. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember I try and get him into music. It's annoying because now that I'm older, there's so much music I like that I'm certain he would be really into. But I try and get him into music and he wouldn't be that into it. But there was one album which it wasn't necessarily that amazing of an album. It was James Michael, the singer of 6am, back before he was in 6am, and it's because the song on there was Joe Mitchell. Is She Really Going Out with Him? No,
Joe Jackson.
Jackson. I'm thinking of Joni Mitchell, mix them together. Joe Jackson, Is She Really Going Out with Him? And Dad always used to play that song when he used to play guitar and stuff in the evenings. And so when I showed him that album, I showed him that song first, and he loved the album. Even though the 6am album he did quite like, but he liked, because you showed it to me and I showed him the first album. And there was a song on there he liked the most, which was Intermission, which is quite bizarre because it's the least songy song on there. But it was just quite bizarre. And I remember him being like that. But I do remember him being like really, really nice at random things. Like one thing that did make me feel always really happy was, especially after he passed, was he used to read newspapers and stuff obviously all the time, and if something in there, a game or a film, had a really good review, he would buy it for me, which is obviously, I was kind of very grateful that I had a dad who had enough money to be able to do that sort of thing. But it was really nice of him putting effort in to something just, I know it's only reading reviews and stuff, but him then going to the shop and buying it and all that sort of stuff, all just to do that. And I always found that was quite nice. Like especially when I was younger, when I was 10, I remember he'd always say I was intelligent to everyone else and tell big people up about me being intelligent. And then he'd always call me an idiot all the time, constantly. Like, I think he probably called me that more than almost anything. Or he used to say, I have a face for the radio, and if I had a brain, I'd be dangerous. That was the main one. If I do anything wrong, if you had a brain, you'd be dangerous. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to this one minor thing. I remember once, in fact, he actually had a go at me because I was spreading lemon curd on toast wrong. Legit. Like, I was just in the kitchen making lemon curd on toast. And he came and, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm making lemon curd on toast. And he's like, you're spreading it all wrong. I was like, it's my fucking toast. There's no right or wrong way of spreading it if I'm going to eat it. Did you, was that the sort of thing you got from him as well?
Yeah, he was pretty pedantic. When it was, it's that saying that my way or the highway. He was very much like that. He'd already have in his head what the best way was. Yeah. And even if you kind of proved him wrong in that moment, he couldn't take it. Maybe later on he wouldn't necessarily admit that you were right, but he would take it on board. But in that moment, he liked to be the smartest and he liked to be in control. And, I think in life he liked to be an old-fashioned man of the house, So he was the smartest, he was the breadwinner, I don't know how he would, I think my mum probably earned more money than him for a while, but when they owned a rest home, but it was still partly his,
Yeah.
I don't think he would deal particularly well. He's quite old-fashioned like that, I think.
Yeah.
His dad's very old-fashioned, obviously, a previous generation, but I think he liked his place to be like head of the table,
Oh yeah, he also became, because obviously he was the oldest of 4 siblings, or him included in the 4, and obviously that probably gave it a very complex, and then obviously he started his own company and all these sorts of other things. It was like he was an incredibly intelligent man, like incredibly intelligent. That was almost the crux, because a lot of the time he'd think he's right all the time, but the problem is that he was right a quite high percentage of the time, which would make it worse, because then he'd be all, I told you so about this sort of thing, and then he just couldn't take being wrong. And I developed that, because my mum was a bit like that at points, but it just became this thing where I could never admit I was wrong either. And it's this weird dynamic when you're in a house full of 3 people and none of them admit they're wrong. So, was your mum like that with him? I'm interested. Because I know you said your mum and my mum were quite similar in a lot of ways.
Some ways, yeah.
Mum doesn't listen to the podcast, so you don't have to worry about that.
I can't imagine my mum listening.
I highly doubt it.
She's not going to listen to anyone else's podcast. She's too busy doing hers about, I don't know, whatever it is. But I don't know. I suppose my mum was, not dissimilar to yours, quite liked kind of nice things and
materialistic.
Quite materialistic, I suppose, and liked all the things going out for dinners and things like this. And I think they were quite similar, but obviously she would stand up for us quite a lot. And my brother was always in trouble, and my dad would quite often run away, which is quite funny because he broke his leg, didn't he, when I was 6.
That was when he skydived, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did a parachute jump and landed wrong, and he didn't break the skin, but his bone snapped and you could see it sticking up. Yeah,
he said it was like his foot was almost basically like hanging off, essentially, because the bone had snapped, so it was keeping it on the inside was like all the tendons and the veins and stuff.
So when he runs with his legs sideways. It's quite funny to watch. It's kind of like a slightly kind of confused chicken. And but Chris would get in trouble and Dad would hobble away. And then my mum would have to deal with it, I think Chris rolled a barrel of wine off, I think, in a supermarket. Not like a giant keg, but it was pretty big. It rolled off and cracked, and all the liquid was pouring out. And we all looked down at the barrel. When we looked up, we just saw his dad's wonky leg going around the corner. He'd done a runner and was in a different aisle. Thanks.
Yeah, that does. It does sound a lot like him. It's one of those weird things where it's just kind of like, I feel like, I imagine you had this. Obviously, the dynamics we had with Dad were very different because obviously he was in my life till when I was 18, then he got ill, and then obviously when I was 19 he was gone. Whereas with you, what time did him and your mother split? How old were you?
I always get this mixed up. I think it was somewhere between being about 12 and 14. I think I was probably about 13 or 14. So
yeah, so it was around that time, and then obviously he ghosted you for quite a while, which is a horrendous thing to do. But then I feel like with mum right now, like when I was living with her, especially after dad passed, understandably, she was a fucking pain in the ass. I couldn't stand her for a while. And then as soon as we moved out, it was like the dynamic changes, and it means when you're not in each other's hair all the time, you can get on a bit better. Did you find, once you kind of ironed out the kinks a little bit, when you got a bit older and you're sort of my sort of age?
I think with Dad as well, I think because the things that he liked were, obviously his favourite thing was like Speedway, and he liked obviously music, and he liked things like wine and things like that.
Yeah.
These are things that Dad wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And if you could hold a sensible conversation with him or show that you had some knowledge in it, he would really respect that, and then he would want to obviously chat back with you. And obviously the older you get, the easier these things are. It's not particularly fair, because obviously you should be trying to talk about things that you want to talk about too.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was quite a wino when I was about 8. No, it's not totally true. I was drunk when I was 7, but so as I got older, we talked about these things more, and obviously I'm really into Speedway, so
for people who just don't know, Speedway is dirt bikes racing on a track, isn't it? It's just like oval shaped track, generally 4 bikes. Each heat is about 3 or so. Is it 3 minutes?
About a minute. The fastest accelerating vehicle on earth.
There you go. I remember, like, I was never that into it, but I remember for me, it was always the least. It's not to display something you're really into, but out of all the sports I could have watched, it was probably the least bad in a sense. I'm now I look at it and I go, that's actually, I can see the appeal, but I'm not really into any sports. But like, you watch football, it's like an hour and a half, and the average is like 2 or 3 goals. It's like an hour and a half, and maybe 3 things happen. Whereas Speedway is like, it's a minute or so.
Yeah, it's 15 races for a minute. The good thing is Formula One lasts, like you say, hours and hours and hours, and nothing happens. Whereas if it's a bad race, well, it's over and there's different people racing the next one, so you've got more chance of something. But I was brought up with it, and Dad used to always go quite often on Wednesday nights, and I would have to stay with my mum, and kind of always wondered where he went and what this amazing thing was, So I think we used to go occasionally, and after a while I really got into it. So we shared that. So we would talk about Speedway and things like that, and obviously, we could, he would talk to me about that, and I think that was easier for me because we had that thing in common. And it's that thing as well, like I said before, if you're a football fan, you turn on the TV or you look outside and there's something about football and everyone's talking about it and it's there in your face whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Speedway is, nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So it's a very small minority. So he didn't have anyone else to talk to about it because obviously our older brother didn't mind it, but he wasn't into it like I was. Like I know all the riders and their faces and their names, and I'm, and a bit of a kind of nerd of it all, I suppose. And we both were really into that, so it was quite easy because it was something that we shared, and I think it made that easier in a way, and because he wanted to talk to me about it because no one else knows about it.
Yeah.
So I was lucky to be the only person he knows really that can talk about what he wants to talk about.
Yeah, it's funny with Dad because I always, when I was younger, I used to think he was quite sociable because you see him in a social situation. He's very charismatic and he likes kind of, in a lot of times, being the centre of attention. He was obviously quite funny a lot of the time. He's very intelligent, and it's like, but then you realise that he actually wants to make no effort with anyone really a lot of the time, and he would just be happy being by himself for extended periods of time a lot of the time, and. I just really like he'd be happiest just, sat playing guitar by himself. When we were on holiday, he'd just go away by himself and play under a tree for a little bit. He liked a lot of solidarity. But as I got older, when I was a teenager, I was quite difficult. Or probably not as difficult as most teenagers, I imagine, but I was probably a bit of a pain in the ass. Because as I remember, this is only when I was, 10 or something, but when we were in Starbucks upstairs, and then I was being a twat, so you threw my shoe or something?
I did. That's not the coolest thing I've ever done. I took your shoe off, and in the end, to try and make a point, I threatened to throw it, and you wouldn't stop going on and talking, so I threw it, and then you had to go and get it off some strangers, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that, but I was a...
Not my finest hour either.
Well, you're my older brother, so, you can, we used to go to Sega Park and, play, was it Dakota? Is that the name of it?
Daytona Racing.
Daytona, that was it. I know what it looks like, and I remember the game itself. I also remember playing House of the Dead a lot. That was a lot of fun, with the House of the Dead 3 with the shotguns. And then Sega Park is only a thing of the past now. Bargate, I got knocked down the other day.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's completely gone. I know it was closed and it was empty for quite a while, 2 years or something. And I walked past it the other day, it's gone.
Yeah, well, I suppose I could still take you to Burger King for healthy lunches, couldn't I?
Oh, yeah, because I used to eat nothing, and then I come home one day to Mum, I like new food, and she was hoping it would be like celery or lettuce, and it was extra large double bacon cheeseburger meals with barbecue sauce. It's like, great, the only thing in the world that you could possibly eat that's less healthy than chicken nuggets.
Yeah, good work on my part. I had to look for that.
Yeah, well, you did it. You managed to. That was the turning point. I think my mum would just always get you to get me to try new things. But I think I just to get into more stuff that was maybe unhealthy.
Yeah.
Maybe I can blame you for being an overweight child. I'm going to blame you for that now, not my parents.
Maybe. I did drop you once as well, so, there's lots of... This could be just like a show of guilt about the bad things I've done.
Yeah. Well, I do have a big dent in the back of my head. So, I mean, they say it was because I was an alien baby who had to take it out. What's the name of the forceps things? I've no idea, but when if the baby's been in the woman too long and they have to pull it out with the vacuum cleanery suctiony things. Yeah, apparently that made my head all pointy and you all called me an alien baby.
Conehead.
Yeah,
see that film?
Is that from Hellraiser?
No, that's Pinhead. Coneheads is a film. Like they're aliens. Dan Aykroyd in it, and they've all got pointy heads. Yeah.
Huh. I've not seen that film.
It's not a great film. It's all right.
Not great. I'm glad I was compared to not a great film either. It could be like a cool film because the xenomorph like poke my tongue out. It's got another little tongue on it.
Yeah.
That'd be very strange. But excuse me. Yeah. Well, with Dad, I was thinking like obviously a lot of things we've said sound very negative, which I imagine my time with Dad was probably a bit more positive than yours in a lot of ways because he probably as he got older. Do you think when he was in his 60s to when he was in his 40s, do you think he was actually that different?
Not really. The basics were the same, I think. And also for me, I think swings and roundabouts because he was a bit more chilled out when you were born and when you were about. But as I said, maybe I got him maybe because I was an adult, I got some of the things. I got some of the bonuses of being another adult, being seen as another adult.
Yeah.
And therefore he would talk to me and take his time. And so, with the Speedway stuff, we would chat for quite a long time about it, and things like that. And especially if Dad had a few drinks, you could catch him in the right mood. He would be very chatty,
Yeah.
And he would give you stuff.
What's that? You told me once that you got him. Was it you got him drunk and?
I didn't purposely. There wasn't like a plan. I didn't turn around here and like sneak booze into him to try and steal from him. It wasn't like that. It was just a barbecue. He was quite drunk, and then we were talking about stuff, and he just kind of suggested. I think I had his amp and his mic stand, and randomly a Travelling Wilburys album. But then he would every 4, maybe 6 months, would then try and get them back, saying I'd stolen them. And I told him he could have them back, but I also pointed out he'd given them to me, and he was trying to deny it. And I still got it all, so I don't know.
I do remember he was... I can't remember many of the dad jokes, him saying any, but I do remember the best one, which was when you used to do band practice in his office, and him getting out that giant fan, and getting a post-it note on it and say... Rob's biggest fan. I thought that was one of the funniest things ever, but I think that was probably about 7 years ago now.
I think one time he bought 6 fans and it just said Rob's Fan Club.
Oh, fan. Brilliant.
Any fan-based humour.
Yeah, that's great. I like that sort of stuff. It cracks me up. But, yeah, that... Even though a lot of things you're saying it doesn't sound great on Dad, but, I do respect him. Obviously, he did his own company. He was a twat a lot of the time, but it was... You could get him at the right times. I think all my mates really liked him because he'd always try and not be a dick around mates and stuff. Yeah,
I think he was reasonably sociable, and I think he was quite comfortable in his own skin, and I think he was quite confident. He was very confident in his own rightful place where he felt happy.
Yeah.
I think... and I think he probably hid a lot of his insecurities very well. He's not a person that let his feelings out massively,
I never saw Dad cry, and he only ever apologised to me once, which I'll get into in a bit, but that's it. He's never... I remember yelling a lot and not apologising. There's one point I remember, which was the moment when I was a teenager, and I lost a lot of respect for him, unfortunately, which was we were arguing about something. This was when I was 16, and... I said to him, I was like, you're not always right. And he shouted in my face, yes, I am. And I was like, okay, I can't, what's even the point then? When someone's that sort of anal about their own intelligence, it's a bit like, what's even the point? That did bother me quite a lot. But then I think with Dad, it was a lot of that. as you said, sort of thing, where sometimes it's just you let these little things go just because he will never ever apologise. He just wouldn't. So you just kind of have to let little things go to just deal with things.
Yeah, I think, they always say, don't you, you can't choose your family. And I think you have to make the most of what you've got. And I don't think, people will say you've only got one mum, you've only got one dad, you've only got this and that, and I think it's true, but I don't think necessarily that you have to, think the sun shines out of their ass just because it's this. And I don't think that you have to necessarily spend all your time and put up with them because if they're very horrible. My dad was never purposely horrible. He was very stubborn and very selfish, and I think probably quite self-righteous at times.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a horrible person,
No.
And we made him sound like a kind of angry, know-it-all, child-beating tosser. But that's where I get it from. But, he was what he was, and as you say, he was very likeable and he's very charismatic. And when he was in the mood, we used to go to Cardiff all the time for the Speedway.
Yeah.
And
I used to as well.
Yeah, he used to moan all the time. It was too noisy. And the only person who didn't want air horns, Chris and I, when we were kids, Chris used to sneak up on you and just put the air horn end over your ear, and my face would feel like it was vibrating for about 3 hours. And you're the only kid we ever knew that didn't like the air horns. But
yeah, that was me.
But because we used to go quite often, and your mum would come with us as well. Your mum never really liked Speedway, and she just liked shopping in Cardiff. So it would quite often, if your mum came, it would end up being like a shopping session, and we would kind of follow around, there 1 or 2 beers, and then occasionally we'd end up going without your mum and just the 3 of us, and it could be quite a heavy session, Yeah,
yeah.
And some of that was quite cool. And Dad would have a few beers and sort of relax,
Yeah, yeah.
And I was telling you earlier before this about obviously me spilling the milkshake and going down the steps. Well, Dad knocked over a whole pint of Guinness in the grandstand, and you watched all these people jump up one by one, and he looked away as if it was nothing to do with him at all. And he was really drunk, and it was just good fun, and he was in the right mood. If you caught him in the right mood, he was a really good laugh, and he was really good fun. And I think around other people, he would step it up and put more effort in,
Yeah, yeah. It was a thing, obviously it does go without saying, but obviously we very much miss Dad, especially now I'm older. It's quite annoying because where I moved out, especially, the relationship with Mum has gotten so much better, and as I've gotten older I kind of know, like when I was younger I was more naive of Dad's flaws. I didn't notice them all until I got more teenager, and then obviously after he passed it became a lot more apparent what some of his flaws were, where obviously you have always been older than me, so you've always kind of already seen the flaws. So it's a weird dynamic, but obviously Dad was he wasn't the best dad in the entire world, but I'm not sure if anyone really can take that stand. I don't know how anything could be, but he did make, I don't know if it's genetics or the way he was, but it did always make me want to strive for more. He was congratulatory when you did do something right, or at least when I can't speak for you obviously, but with me, when I got the job at Whizbeer, and when I was making music videos, and when he was live during the time of me making them, and when I got my certificate grade 2 or whatever in keyboard, and when I got quite good grades with maths, he was always very congratulatory and always very, you did a lot of hard work, and I appreciate that, because obviously, Dad grew up, he was born in 49. That was right, wasn't it? 49. So obviously it was like 4 years after the war had ended. The family was like one of the poorest possible, wasn't it? It was like 4 kids with the parents, Grampy, who I never met. It was like did Grandma have a job? Like, I know obviously Grandma died when, was that around the time you were born?
No, I never met her. I think she died when Chris was about 2, and Chris is 4.5 years older than me, so I never met her.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I mean, Grampy worked he was a radio repair shop.
Yeah.
Because they called him Mac, because it was Mac Radios that he worked for.
Oh, okay.
His nickname was Mac, because he would... he was quite an amazing person, because I say he had a spinal injury from... He used to do the human fly. He used to run up the wall in the lounge and touch the ceiling. It was his trick that he would do for people.
Okay.
And then he fell off it one day and damaged his back, and they said that he would never have... He had a family and things, and he had real bad spinal damage. He was always quite crooked.
Yeah.
Walking, but yeah, he got on with it, did the business.
Well, yeah, because Dad was like the miracle baby, wasn't he? That's what.
I think that's what Dad probably told you.
I think that probably is what Dad told me. Yeah, he called himself the miracle baby. Yeah, that does sound like Dad.
I don't know. Yeah, yes, I think so. Yeah. They weren't expecting it, obviously, but obviously he was only a quarter of the miracles because obviously there was 4 of them in all.
Yeah, he was the first miracle, and then after, by the end, it was like, okay, maybe not so much of a miracle by comparison.
Yeah, I think perhaps someone should have given Grampy the birds and the bees talk. It's not a miracle. That's where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, obviously he was very poor, and then he did. I don't know what his financial situation was when he was with your mum and stuff. Like, what did he work at? He worked in forwarding, didn't he? And that's how he kind of started his company when he was with my mum. He just knew all the contacts, and he just...
Yeah, he'd always worked, and he was obviously quite high up in shipping. Yeah, shipping and forwarding.
Yeah.
When I was born in Winchester Hospital, because we lived in Winchester, because it was, at the time, it was much cheaper to live in Winchester than Southampton.
Really? Huh.
So they found a cheap place in Winchester to live, and Dad just slowly got, better jobs as he went along and moved up, and got a much better job in Southampton. So they moved back to Southampton. So obviously, out of us lot, I was the only one born in Winchester because everyone else, we've always been hanging around sort of Southampton.
Well, I was born in Portsmouth, oddly enough.
You were born in Portsmouth.
Yeah.
I was about to say, but at the time,
yeah,
because obviously all his family were all Woolston,
I think all of our family now basically all live within probably, including us even, like, with Chris, you, me, Charlotte, Uncle Chris, Uncle John, Beryl, we all live within, probably 3 miles of each other. I think all of them, excluding me and you, I think Chris, other Chris and the rest of them, they would probably live within about a mile of each other.
Yeah, it's been incestual. Geographically incestual, is that?
Yeah,
is that a term?
I think it's ancestrally convenient. That's geographically ancestrally convenient. That's it. It's going to name the podcast. Give people the wrong impression.
Geocestical.
Oh, geocestical. That's that could be taken in so many different ways, and probably all of them being wrong.
Yeah, because I think, obviously Dad's brother lived in Eastleigh for quite a while, and that's why our cousin Wayne lives probably Eastleigh way now, because that's where he was brought up,
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
So he lives in Charles Ford, but yeah, they're all pretty much around Woolston way. So everyone was born in Southampton, but we moved to Winchester for a while because it was cheaper. We lived, I think when we moved, I know that before I was born, they lived in St Mary's, but and it was quite rough, and
yeah,
I know there was quite a lot of issues there, and I think they had a chance to move to Winchester for similar money,
Yeah.
And it was much nicer, so they went to Winchester because it was cheaper to be there then, and obviously he worked his way up in shipping, and obviously his jobs got better. But basically, I think what happened was, I think the band they were in at the time had a chance to make a bit more money and be a bit more serious, but they wanted them to do covers, and they were going over to play for all the forces, and they were going for Germany and all sorts of places.
Yeah.
And Dad had just got the best job he'd ever had, and his money had gone up, and Mum was pregnant with Chris.
Oh, okay.
So Mum used to sing in the band as well. And obviously they had to make a choice. They needed a steady income because obviously it was like 3 months and they would be back after the tour without any job prospects.
Yeah.
So Dad had to quit the band and chose to stay and obviously make money for their son to be,
Yeah.
So I think that sort of changed things quite a lot. But yeah, he's always worked in shipping pretty much since he was a teenager. But obviously, the more people you know and you move up and you get more respect and people come to you, and obviously it's much easier to open your own company and work from there because people know your experience and they know that you get it done. So I think
I think Dad had one of the more conservative outlooks on life, especially because in his mind, obviously, when I was about, obviously the first few years that I was about, him and Mum were really quite poor, and then once his company sort of started going, he had obviously quite a bit more money, and we were fairly well off. And I think his thing was he was always working hard. It was 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and then also Saturday, Sunday he would usually be working 9 till 12 as well. And he'd always have that striving work ethic, and I think it's kind of rubbed off on me and you a little bit in the sense where obsession makes it sound quite a negative connotation, but with things you get quite me and you get fixated on stuff, whether it's movies or like it's movies or music or this or that. I just want to, if I had my way, I'd just be podcasting all the time. That's basically all I do. And obviously you're much more musical and a lot more talented than I am, so yours will be, you're in 3 bands at the moment.
I don't know about that, but yeah, obviously they're different things, aren't they? Obviously
he's very driven, Dad.
But the work ethic thing, I think, is obviously strong in all of us, and probably
Well, Chris does. I want to pretense. Chris, I don't know what he does extracurricular wise, but he does a manual labour job, which is a lot more taxing than probably anything you or I do, because it's. Well, I did work with him for 6 years ago, and it killed me.
Yeah, obviously, but Chris obviously has got a very strong work ethic and goes in all the time. And
he's always working.
And I think we've got that from him. And I think obviously that side of things we know. I think when you earn your money and you feel proud of it, I think Dad lost his. Sometimes Dad struggled to look back, so I think he would struggle to see. Like me saying, "Can I borrow £30?" I don't think he could understand why I'd need to borrow £30.
Because in his mind, he was like, "I've got money."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why haven't you got savings?
Yeah.
The situation is, but if you went back 20, 30 years, you were there.
Yeah.
However far back you were living in St Mary's and you were struggling.
Yeah.
He didn't look back like that. I think Dad was always looking forward.
Yeah, which was one of the things.
Yeah, not to say that's totally a fault all the time or anything like that.
Oh no, but that was one of the problems when he got older, especially when he started to get ill.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, because I think perhaps when he was ill, him looking forward and thinking what he was going to do next was probably maybe a positive for him, because even though it wasn't realistic, it kind of gave him hope and drive,
Well, yeah, I've heard. Well, it's probably quite nice. I want to just a pretense, obviously. I think we've spoken to Dad quite a lot. He was a great man. He was probably not the best man, morally, but he was a good person. I think in at heart, he could be a bit of a dick sometimes, but he was a good person, and he was very intelligent, very driven, and then obviously he got ill, and that was when I was 18. When he got ill. I mean, when he told me, I remember I came home from. It was college, because it was the second year of college. I think it was when he got ill. I was like 17 or 18. And he'd always had, I don't know if he had it with you when you were younger or anything, but he always had indigestion just all the time. And then I remember he was always taking Gaviscon for years and years. And then the doctors eventually gave him a pill which sorted out his stomach acid. Then for about 2 or 3 years, he was basically symptomless and he was completely fine.
Meprazole.
Yeah, and then suddenly it was not working, and then they looked deeper, and then obviously it hit the whole, however long it had been, it was Barrett's syndrome that had become cancer. And I think it's, for layman's terms, from what I understand, I don't know if you know more about it than I do, but when I describe it to people in really, really layman's terms, it's kind of like your stomach acid essentially is too much or splashes against your esophagus. Essentially, it burns around it. You get little polyps on there, which is basically Barrett's syndrome. And then if they become cancerous, it becomes cancer.
Yeah, they don't always become cancerous.
Yeah.
And obviously they can be treated reasonably easily,
But if they pick it up early enough, that's the problem, because the line between having a bit of indigestion quite a lot, especially when you like spicy food, compared to having something that's
a difficult one to notice,
Yeah, definitely. I've said to other people before, and things that scares me a little bit of cancer is, everyone gets it, where you're just walking down the street or you're just doing something and then you just get a stabbing pain. It could be in your leg, it could be in your chest, it could be in your arm, anywhere, just a random pain, just like 2 or 3 seconds, and it's gone. And it's just like, what was that? I don't know.
That's why you shouldn't look on the internet.
Well, that's the thing. You look on the internet and it tells you that you've got cancer and you're dying, you've got 3 weeks to live, so I try not to do that too much, but you have to have an air of caution of it. If you keep getting the same feeling over and over again, you should probably go to the doctors.
Is that cheerydiagnosis.com?
Yeah, you're going to die tomorrow.
Yeah. What's bad knee? Your balls are going to fall off.
Yeah, a paper cut, you're just going to get infected, you're going to get gangrene and get your arm amputated. But, yeah, he got ill, he got Barrett's, basically he had Barrett's syndrome, then that became cancer. And he sat, him and Mum sat me down in the front room in our lounge, I remember, and they both looked very serious, and sat down, and he apologised, which is what I said earlier. The only time Dad has ever apologised to me, the only time he's ever said sorry, was when he told me he had cancer, which is, I'd rather he just never apologised to me, if I'm honest. But he explained, he said, I've got this, it's probably terminal, we're hoping that the chemo and the radiotherapy and stuff will sort it, but I think when he told me at the time, they thought he might have a few years. And he just said, when he explained it all to me, he just said, I'm sorry. So I was just like, fucking hell, you don't. I didn't say that to him, fucking hell, I didn't say it to him. I don't think I swore ever around Dad, but, I understand where he's coming from, but it's just quite upsetting that the only time Dad has ever apologised to me ever is when he's saying sorry for having cancer. And it's like, that's the one time in your life, Dad, where you do not need to apologise for anything, It's really shit, obviously, because Dad telling you have cancer is awful, and then Well, we'll get into the more details a little bit as we go. But how did you find out of interest? Because obviously,
I think he phoned me up that it was either that day or the next day, as he said he told you. Yeah, and he just had basically phoned up and just said he not went very well. He'd had problems with his chest, and he'd gone in and they'd found out that he had cancer, and it was as you say, he thought pretty much that was going to be it, and he was waiting to see pretty much how long they thought he'd have.
Yeah.
And it was quite a weird one. It was obviously quite a kind of stunner, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of stopped me in my tracks. But it was quite obviously one of the heavier phone calls I've had.
Yeah, and, definitely. Well, it's like there's 2 points, which is as you got older, obviously you got a bit closer to Dad, especially. Obviously, you often had to be the one to make all the effort with Dad. That was kind of unfortunately the point of it. But if you made the effort, then especially when Speedway season was on, then you get that. But I was just gonna say one thing of I remember you saying before when you split up with your previous partner, when you called up Dad. I remember you telling me about that, where it was just he was probably the only person who wasn't. Yeah.
I phoned up and said, I said I'd finished. We were finished, and I wasn't there anymore, and it was over, and and everyone else was kind of disgusted with me and kind of disappointed and everything else, and Dad just went, "Oh, that's a shame. Have you seen the Speedway results?" And then he just started talking about the Speedway like he always did, and it was slightly reassuring, and it was just like he was an accidental rock, because he obviously was just the same slightly thoughtless Speedway obsessed idiot that he was the day before, and it was the only person that hadn't got upset.
Yeah.
And that was quite interesting. I said, well, the thing of me, as I said before, that Dad would only ever phone me for the Speedway.
Yeah.
And he would phone me to tell me, as I said to you before, we were talking about this before, and Dad kind of was quite slow. He was always alright with technology, but he was a bit behind everyone else.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he found out, obviously, on the internet, he could find everything he ever wanted to know out, which was only really Speedway.
Speedway or music.
And then every morning on the British Speedway website, there would obviously be updates, and they would tell you like 2 or 3 lots of new news. And then every morning, well, probably 3 mornings a week, he would phone me and say, "Have you seen the website?" And if I would say yes, he'd go, "Oh, so you know about?" And I'd say, "Yeah," and that would be that.
Yeah.
He'd go, "Right, see you later then."
Yeah.
So I learned after a while to just pretend I hadn't heard it. So I read it. So I'd already read it this morning because I was exactly the same as him. As soon as I got into work, I'd looked.
Yeah.
But I'd just go, "No, I haven't seen it. What's happening?" And he would just explain it to me in massive detail, almost word for word.
Yeah.
And it was just a good way of getting some extra contact,
Yeah.
And, I kind of enjoyed that. So it was quite weird to actually get a phone call from him that wasn't about Speedway. It's kind of like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, I remember at his funeral, one of the things you said, and we were talking about it before, because obviously me, you and Chris hung out before the funeral and just trying to work out what we'd sort of say. And you saying one of the strangest kind of upsetting things was straight after he passed away, you'd find out something about Speedway and be like, "Oh, I'll tell Dad about that." Oh. And I kind of had that with music a bit, especially as I've gotten older now. I'll go into more detail of that later, but I just wanted to say that thing with you linking with Speedway, I remember you saying that and being like...
Yeah, because, as I said, no one else follows Speedway, so it's one of those things. I haven't got anyone else to tell anything. You think, that's exciting news. Oh, I'll tell Dad about that. And that used to go on for quite a long time, Go, "Oh, yeah, I'll give him..." "Oh, yeah, I can't." I remember even sometimes dreaming about phoning him up or the phone ringing and it being him,
Yeah.
And it was very strange.
Yeah.
He kind of suddenly wasn't there, and I know that Chris and I convinced him pretty much to go to a Speedway meeting. He hadn't gone all year and wasn't feeling too good.
Yeah.
We kind of convinced him he didn't really want to go, and he kind of just about went, and it wasn't a great meeting, but I think probably 2/3 of the night he was absolutely fine, and then he went really distant, and it was just like an empty sort of shell of someone, and then he took the morphine, and about 20 minutes later he was back again, and he was Dad, and he was talking about it, and he really enjoyed it, and it was great. And then obviously I think about 2.5 weeks later he was gone.
Yeah.
So we were kind of really, really chuffed that we kind of made him go one last time.
Yeah, because it was because basically when he got more and more ill, I mean the first year that he was ill, he was noticed, you could tell he was ill, but it wasn't too obvious. Obviously, there was a point where he fall over at the Swan Pub and he hurt his leg and he had crutches for a bit. But like, generally, I'd say the first year he was still generally dad. And then for the last 6 months or so, he slowly deteriorated, not just because of his body was being eaten away by it all, but also because you're on so many pain, like the amount of pills he was taking, because obviously I lived with him, so I could see everything. The amount of pills he was taking, he wasn't eating properly, and all these sorts of other things. He just became, like, one of Dad's main things was quick and intelligent, and obviously there's more parts of his personality than that, but when you had him be quite slow and distant and couldn't quite focus on things anymore, and he stopped watching movies because he just couldn't really follow them because he'd get halfway through it and kind of forget, and that sort of stuff is like, I imagine that's a lot of what having Alzheimer's is kind of like, and that's one of the horror, like when people die of that sort of thing, it's horrendous. You just watch them kind of, they're in their own head so much they become like a shell. And that was what kind of happened towards the end with him, especially because I'd see him every day, and it was getting worse than the last obviously few weeks. I mean, what was it? On my birthday, he played the Noddy Croak gig, where obviously we've got the video footage of that and stuff.
Yes, that was the reunion of his
band,
teenage band.
Yeah. So and he played on stage. He had a neck brace on and a crutch, but he still sang pretty damn well. And he was on stage for like an hour. Like, that was 2 months almost to the day before he died of cancer. Like, it's insanely impressive, the drive, being able to do that. And I remember him deteriorating, getting worse and stuff, and it was obviously horrendous to watch. And then the chemo obviously wasn't working, and the radiotherapy wasn't working, and eventually they just had to stop it because it would be the thing to kill him. And then there was a point, I remember, where it was Dad and Mum's wedding anniversary, which I think was early May, or late April. And I remember him being too ill to get her a card, so he asked me to go get one. And that was, when he did that and I did that, that was it. I was like, God, I'm going to fucking lose him soon. I could just tell. And it was like, because it's a weird one, because you get certain family members, like Uncle Steve, who died unfortunately a year later, where you get no warning or anything. And people have asked me before my opinions on, not quite as bluntly as, would you have preferred your dad to die the same date but in a blink, or just like over time? And I don't think there's a right answer in a sense. Obviously it depends on the person, but like with Uncle Steve, I always remember Uncle Steve being Uncle Steve, and then he was gone. And it was the shock that hurt more than almost anything. And obviously I wasn't as close to Uncle Steve as my own dad, but it was the shock that hurt the most. Whereas with Dad, when he was actually gone, it was almost like a relief, because the few weeks leading up to that, he was so ill and he was in so much pain. It was nice to him finally be at peace. But the unfortunate part is, especially because of where I was younger, there is a percentage of my memory of him being ill. And that's really shit. You know, it's that upset of the last 6 months or so, where I'd spend, obviously, as you see him getting more ill, you make an effort to spend more time with him. And that means that you have more memories of him being ill, which is awful. But on the last day, on the day that he died, actually, I remember, it would be my biggest regret ever if Mum hadn't got me to do this, and I'm so fucking happy, Mum. If there's anything Mum's ever done for me that I appreciate, it is this one thing, which was, I was going to work, because I'd been at work at that point, Whizbit, which I've spoken about before, but I was working at Whizbit as an apprentice, and I'd been there since February, and Dad passed mid to late May. And the morning that he died, the morning of the day that he died, I was running late and stuff, and I was in a terrible mood for some reason. I was trying to rush about, and Mum was like, "Oh, come say hi to Dad." And I'm really in a hurry. I really need to go. She's like, "Just come say hi to Dad." And there's a part of me that was really like, I really need to go. But a part of me was just like, no, I'll go see Dad. And I'm so fucking glad, because if I hadn't, I'd regret it so much. And I went and I saw him, and he was in bed, and he was obviously very, very ill. And that was at the point where the last week or so, I think he was just completely bedridden. And I spoke to him, and he was like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just going to work and stuff." And he was like, "Oh, I'm really proud of you." I was like, "Oh, thanks, Dad." You know, he was like, "I'm really proud that you've done this, that, and the other." And then, Dad, he would hug me, or like when I was younger, especially, I'd always make an effort to hug him and stuff, but he was never the most overly affectionate. But I just remember, the last thing Dad ever said to me was that he loved me. I hugged him when he was in bed, and I said, and he was like, "I love you, son." And I was like, "I love you too, Dad, and I'll see you later." And obviously I didn't. And that was the day where, because I think you went over shortly after that, and again that morning, because that's when he moved from there to the hospice.
Yeah.
And obviously, from what you tell me, that was fucking horrendous, where they just couldn't get him out properly, trying to get him on the sort of stretcher, and then they had trouble getting down the stairs and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think he was a bit confused, and I think he obviously wasn't sure what was going on. Obviously, I convinced them to just use his sheet that he was on and just slide him across on it, and then bring the sheet back later, and we weren't worried about that. We just wanted him to be comfortable. And obviously, as I said to you before, he looked so confused and lost, and I held his hand and said, "It's all right, Dad, it's all right. They're just taking you down the stairs," which surprised me because they were brilliant, but they normally explain what they're doing, and they didn't,
Yeah.
And he looked at me and kind of smiled, and he was making some... Later on, when we saw him again, he was making some funny noises, and he wasn't himself at all.
No.
But he was totally quiet in the bed, but he just smiled at me and looked reassured, and I squeezed his hand,
Yeah.
And I said, "It's all right, Dad, they're just taking you, down the stairs, and then you'll be all right, you'll be in the ambulance." But when I said Dad, he actually looked up at me, and it was, it was a nice moment, and also I just wanted him to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think it felt like, my confidence, he felt it,
Yeah,
and it was all right. And obviously, he then went to counter to smell baton later on, didn't he? And he struggled in the ambulance. So I think that was painful and awkward, and he was quite confused. And then obviously, he sort of passed away early hours in the morning, didn't he?
Yeah, because I'm glad that we at least had those moments. I mean, as I said, if Mum hadn't sort of said, "Come on, go to him," I wouldn't have, and that would. I'm so happy because that would. I think that is even the thought that I potentially would have done that is such a regret, and I feel bad about that now, even though I managed to do the right thing essentially, and it's upsetting. But yeah, when I'm not going to get into too horrendous graphic detail or anything, but like when he was in the hospice, I kind of wish I hadn't gone and seen him till after he passed, because when we went and saw him, he was. It was only a few hours before he passed, where he had. I remember me sat upright and he was making odd noises. He wasn't really responding. You were trying to talk to him and he wasn't responding. His eyes were kind of half rolled back, and he was like, sort of. It sounded like he was choking a little bit, and obviously it ended up being. I think what they said was he was being kept alive by the painkillers and morphine and stuff, but he was basically hemorrhaging, which is just horrendous. And I just remember seeing him there, and I remember Mum being by his bedside and obviously crying and calling his name and stuff, and it was just fucking awful. And then I remember that, because that was the last time I technically saw him alive, but that wasn't the last time I saw Dad. That was the last time I saw Dad's body being alive. But I remember leaving there at that point, because I think I came over yours or something, and it was pretty damn late. And then I just remember getting to yours and just thinking, I was like, I just want him to die now, because I would never, want to wish death upon anyone, but when it was that bad, it was awful. And then when we finally got the call from Mum saying, he's gone, it was such a relief, because I couldn't imagine seeing him. If he could have. Some people get put in that state, and if they're on enough morphine, enough drugs, and their body's somehow kind of half fighting enough, they could be stuck in that state for days, weeks, longer. Yeah. And it was quite a relief in the sense that even though the last few weeks and maybe months of Dad, he wasn't quite there, when he got horrendously bad, it was over quite quick, it was quite a nice.
Yeah, Dad didn't really suffer in the scheme of things,
No, he was. It was yeah. But Councilman Batten, the people there were also nice, and I couldn't imagine a job worse. Not in the sense of like.
It's a very hard job, isn't it?
Yeah, like I don't have the. I'm not the most overly emotional person in the sense of I don't cry that often and that sort of thing, but. God, being around, just watching people come into a place to die, those people are so resilient.
Yeah, but it's an incredible thing, isn't it? Because obviously it's an amazing thing, because they kind of help people.
Oh yeah, I'm so thankful for all of them. They were so nice as well, and they all.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Because us obviously after he passed for a couple of years after that, you've been doing charity gigs for Countless Mountbatten and raising money for them and stuff. Because they did some fantastic things. But yeah, I mean with excuse me, one of the things. Because obviously, where this happened 5 years ago, where I was only 19, and since then I've had friends who their family members have passed away, or people I've known who their parents are ill, something like that. And when I was dating a previous girlfriend of mine, one of her friends, their dad died of cancer, and she was like 22 or 21 at the time. And she said to me, as part of the reason I kind of watched this podcast a little bit was like, she said to me, well, how can I help? And it's a weird thing because when a family member passes away like that, there's no magic words you can say, and there's nothing you can do that will make you feel everything feel better necessarily. But I found that just someone just kind of being there was enough. Like there's no magic answer you can say to make the pain go away. There's nothing you can say to stop it when someone's going through this and someone's suffering with this sort of thing. But if you've just got people there who care about you and they're like, look, if you want to talk about it, I will. If you'd rather just spend the next 6 hours playing video games, watching films and not thinking about it, I'm happy for that too. But, excuse me. Then that's kind of all I needed, in a sense. That's kind of, there wasn't a right answer, but it's just one of those things where there's a quote from Corey Taylor. If people don't know, he's a member of 2 bands and he's written a few books and that sort of thing. And someone close to him died, Paul Gray, and he basically said, it was a quote, and he said, it gets easier to deal with, but it never gets better. And I think that's quite an apt way of having it. Like it doesn't. Looking back on it, it's easier for me to deal with. I'm not as upset as I was obviously when it first happened, that sort of thing. But the situation was never any better. But it is what it is. You've got to deal with it. How did you sort of?
I don't know. So there's arguments that sometimes you don't necessarily go over these things. I think it's difficult. I think you've got to be honest and you've got to let it out if you can. And I think people hold things in. I don't know what the answers are, but.
Well, there isn't. I don't want to put you on the spot and make you think you've got the answers.
Obviously, everyone's different, and I think you need what you need. And I think understanding people around you and too much pressure, but and obviously you just want to feel loved and close. And I think things like that do bring people closer.
Yeah.
And I think with Dad though as well, because one thing we haven't really talked about was. I found when he got ill, I found it all quite inspiring because he's quite a selfish person at times and very stubborn. And he would run away from lots of things that he didn't want to deal with, which we probably all got a bit of.
Yeah.
And but when he found out that he was dying, that was kind of it. He kind of lifted his chin up and kind of said, "Right, I'm doing this now, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this."
Yeah.
That wasn't really what I expected. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. And he took me by surprise.
Yeah.
And I found it quite inspiring. And he was very positive and he kind of just got on with stuff. And he didn't achieve some of the ridiculous things that he was desperate to achieve in this who knows how amount of time.
Yeah.
But the fact is he was having a go and it kind of pushed him along. And I was just really surprised because I thought he'd just throw himself into work and go and just get on with it and not acknowledge it, And instead he kind of faced it and got on, and it really surprised me, People say, these situations you maybe just show your true self or maybe, act differently than you'd expect, and he just kind of wowed me a bit with it. He was kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, and it really was. It really made me think, kind of very proud of him.
Yeah, definitely. The gig especially, like, that was the main thing that... Especially where he died so soon after the gig. And after the gig, he was crying because he was in so much pain after being on stage for 40 minutes or an hour singing along. Because obviously, that's 2 months before dying. I just remember he played so well, and obviously we've got the footage of it and stuff. And I remember I watched it back. And obviously I edited the video footage and stuff like that. So I saw it quite a bit when I was making the DVD and stuff. But it was just like, getting up on stage... Like a lot of 60-year-olds, just standard, wouldn't be able to get on stage. But he was 63, I think, when he passed, and it was incredibly inspiring. It was just like, if no one would have obviously been upset if he just wouldn't been able to do it, because he had a neck brace and he could only just sort of walk, and he was so ill. But he did. He was like, I'm going to do this. It's for charity. I want to raise money for people going through this sort of thing. I really want to do this. I want to almost say fuck you to cancer. I'm still going to do this. And it was incredibly inspiring, as you say. It was just that night made me more proud of him than probably ever, I'd say. And yeah, as you say, when he did, he was very positive about the whole thing. He wouldn't dwell on it. He wouldn't kind of be all woe is me about it all. He was just like, no, let's just do it. We'll get through this. And I remember him talking to me, and he'd be like, no, we'll get through this as a family. We'll get, kind of in the best way, stiff upper lip sort of thing, but in a real positive.
Yeah, it just surprised me because I didn't think that's what he was like.
Yeah,
it's not. That's not me putting down who he was, but it's just that's not how I expected him to react to it, and he really did surprise me, and it took me back. And then I was taken aback by it, and I also felt a bit guilty that I was kind of, I was so chuffed that he was like that. But I think he just came out of it fighting, and I think it took me by surprise, and he just got on with it. And like you say, I think we all just tried then to just see as much of him and be around him. And that was the interesting thing as well. We were talking about earlier, you said about, obviously you have to put up with someone's weaknesses and who they are and what their issues are. And sometimes if you want to be around someone like your dad, you have to put up with all the crap or not be there. And I've been talking to other people as well and their dads, and they're like that, and you either... Normally the kids that seem to get on best with the dads as they're older are the ones that go, right, he is a bit of a knob end. He is going to do this. He's going to sulk about that. He's going to not be happy about that. But if I want to be here talking to him, and he's my dad, then this is what I have to put up with. And him and I had rows, and we didn't speak for about 3 months once, and all these things. But when the minute we knew he had cancer, to be honest with you, he couldn't do any wrong, and you just have to make the most of that time. So I would just come round, see him every day. I think I would see him 5-6 days a week.
Yeah, well, obviously I lived at that point, so I sort of different. Yeah, so obviously I saw you putting that effort in. Really, clarifying. I saw you a lot then.
But obviously, because you've got to make the most of these things, and no matter how close you are or not, you've still got to grab these chances to see someone before they're going, Yeah. And like you said earlier about instantly going or knowing what's going to happen, at least with Dad who knew he was going, that we could all come round and put more effort in and
say goodbye in a sense.
Make sure we saw him, and made the most of him while he was there.
Because I think everyone generally got to say goodbye to him as well, in some sense, at least.
I mean, but obviously it's one of those things, isn't it? Because you just take it for granted a little bit. And even if you're not that close to your parents, they're still your parents, and I think if you get a chance, you need to be able to feel like you've seen it and done what you can,
Yeah. And it's like that with a lot of things. I mean, with going to a certain point that we mentioned previously, which I think I've said on the podcast previously as well, is family. You don't get to choose your family, but you do choose your friends. But with certain members of family, I don't feel like people should... If you really, really don't get along with a family member and they are just horrible and malicious and awful to you, not saying Dad is at all, not saying he was anywhere near that bad, but if you do have an abusive parent or anything along those lines, you shouldn't feel like you have to make an effort to see them, because even though, you're blood, that doesn't mean you have to like them, you have to put the effort in. But when you do have someone who you do at least like, and obviously we all love Dad, and he was a very flawed man, but he was, as I always say, he's a great man, but not necessarily the best man he could have been. But he was still a nice enough person. And then when obviously he did get ill and everyone kind of went around him, the best I found came out in him as well, because he was surrounded by people trying to push for positivity, and then he was trying to be positive as well, and it kind of all bounced off each other. And so the last sort of year and a half, it was almost like the Dad was happiest that he'd been, in a way, because he was sort of trying a lot harder,
Yeah, I think obviously everyone would just forgive him everything as well, because obviously the situation. But I think we love Dad, and I think it's difficult, obviously, talking about someone, and you're trying to be honest and trying to point out their flaws, and it's very difficult to not just be pointing out their flaws. It's difficult to not sound like that both of us are just kind of
snagging him off,
picking on him. And he was an amazing guy, and he had such a heart of gold at times, and he would, treated all sorts of things, and he would, and he'd be so excited. It was strange because very materialistic, but actually, say things like Speedway scores and things like that, and a certain person's new album or a song coming out, or little things. It's like when one of the bands we made an album. Nobody makes albums anymore, but he was almost like he felt that we'd made it. It's like we were we were the number one selling album. We weren't at all, but we just basically put 9 songs on a CD rather than everyone else who was still started making EPs and only had 5.
Yeah.
And it was like the right thing, old school, to do, and he was really chuffed with that.
Yeah.
But I'd made loads more music before that, but he had little things that he really liked, and then he would really get into that, and it would really matter a lot to him, and they weren't necessarily expensive things,
Yeah.
He liked meals out, and and he liked holidays and all this stuff, and he liked the finer things, but I think he was a guy that really liked what he liked, and I say he was absolutely passionate about the things that mattered to him, and I think family was included in that. I just don't think perhaps he was great at showing it at times. But I think he was a wonderful person, and but he was obviously a pain in the ass. And we were saying before, you and I talking about this, that people glamorise and give their relatives halos that have gone,
Yeah.
And I don't think that can be frustrating when you don't see someone's flaws, but when you're trying to explain to someone, it can sound a bit negative, but in my heart, I know how much I love Dad, so my mouth can say anything that I want, and it doesn't change what's in my heart,
Yeah.
And obviously, for someone else, it just sounds like he is a miserable sod, and that's where we've got it from.
Maybe.
While we slag him off.
That's it. Well, that's kind of I will start bringing this towards the end now, because I think we've basically kind of said relatively everything we've sort of wanted to say, but like I did want to do this because obviously when we discussed, we were talking about this general thing, I think a few months back probably now, and one of the reasons made me want to do it, especially with you, was when someone does pass away, like it happens with celebrities. I think Amy Winehouse is probably the best example, where a lot of people hated her for what she did or anything like that. Weirdly enough, Amy Winehouse was one of Dad's favourites for a long time. He loved Amy Winehouse, funny enough, but so much of the media and so much of this, that and the other slagged her off and was always against her. And then as soon as she passed away, she was a golden girl. She was perfect. And I think one of the things I kind of try and do, not only in life, but also in the show and this sort of thing, is kind of, life a lot of the time is about the grey area. It's so rare for something to be black or white, in the sense of, it's so rare for someone, it's so rarely a saint, but also it's quite rare, not impossible, it's quite rare for someone to be completely 100% all bad, and when people pass away, you do want to remember the good things about them, but it is important to not forget almost some of their flaws, because then you can learn from them, and you can't just, punch the microphone. You're looking at that so confused now, it's facing away from you, can't talk again. Yeah, the other way.
I'm done.
You're done with that, that's it.
Man, this technology is complicated.
But so I think it's just one of those things where it's, people shouldn't be so glamorizing of people when they pass away or anything like that. It should just be, look for the good parts as well as the bad parts, but don't try and dwell on one more than the other.
I just think everything makes up somebody, don't they? So
yeah,
what negatives and positives, sort of different things, and obviously quite often negatives and later on are quite funny, and it's just.
Well, yeah, we knew Dad a lot better than almost anyone, obviously, because he was our dad. Yeah. So, as I think our final sort of probably note, unless you want to add anything at the end of what I'm about to say, the probably final note was that a lot of people that know Dad was a great man. And obviously I miss him dearly and I love him, but he wasn't perfect, and that's okay. He doesn't have to be, because he was my dad, and I learned from his flaws, but also from his, the best parts about him. I try to utilise the things that I think were the best parts of him, while looking at the things that he was faulted in the ways that he was, and learn from them. And I hope that when I have kids one day, they'll be the same in that way, That's probably all I was going to say. Is there anything else you'd like to...
Makes me feel about Jerry Springer at the Final Thought type thing going on,
I don't watch Jerry Springer, so I don't even know what that is. So you've just hurt yourself.
I'm old, aren't I?
That is true.
And you'd always say, look after yourself and each other.
Well, that's where we're going to end it then. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Rob. I appreciate it.
It's all good.
And that's the end of the Father's Day special. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate anyone listening to this one, especially because it means so much to me, and I really hope that it either helped someone or gave someone some sort of perspective, or potentially in the future. I mean, I really obviously hope no one has to sort of go through this sort of thing, but unfortunately cancer is incredibly common. I believe the statistics are, I think it's 1 in 2 males are due to get it in their lifetime, and 1 in 3 women. I believe that's from a podcast that Sam Harris did with an oncologist. I can't remember what his name was, but I'd really recommend going back and listening to that podcast. It's quite interesting. So he's a guy who studies cancer, not Sam Harris, is his guest on, and they discuss quite a few things about cancer. So that's quite interesting there. There's not really much else to say about this podcast. I think I covered most of it in the intro. As I just to repeat myself, if anyone wants to talk about this at all, contact me on social media. I'm more than happy to discuss this sort of thing, or just be there if anyone wants to vent. And as I said, it'll be strictly confidential and things like that. So just want to throw that out there. Also, Genuine Chit-Chat is now a part of the Brit pod scene, which is really awesome. If you go on their website and go on their A to Z of podcasts, you'll see my funny little logo in there now, so that's really cool. A bunch of great people. There's some fantastic podcasts on there. In fact, I've done promos, I believe, for 1 or 2 of them. Like we swap promos, that is, I believe, for 1 or 2 of them that are actually in the Britpod scene, I think. And yeah, so I'd really recommend, if you want some new podcasts and you're really into the British accent, or you're just, I don't know, you've just got a thing for British people, go check that out. It's on Instagram and Facebook and all that sort of jazz. So yeah, that's really cool. Thanks to those guys for listening to Genuine Chit-Chat and thinking it's good enough to be involved with that family. It means a lot, really. Obviously, thanks to anyone who's listening. You can like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can email us. I think I put all the sort of details and whatnot in the description, as I usually do. And next week will be another episode of Science But Simple. If you're a new listener, Science But Simple is an episode that I try to do. I think I vaguely do it seem to be every 6 episodes. So it's not every 6th release, because obviously when they're longer podcasts, I often split them in half. But every 6 episodes or so, I try and do a Science But Simple with my friend Josh. Josh is a marine biologist. He knows lots about science. He went to sort of university, got a degree in college, did a lot of science, A-levels and things, and he's much more intelligent than I am. So we try and talk about sort of everyday science and explain it in easy to digest manners. We've done one about the tides and the sun and gravity. We've done one about how light bulbs work and generally understanding how energy works. We did a debunking one a few episodes ago about, funnily enough, about cancer, about genetically modified organisms, GMOs, when people worry about people altering foods and stuff. Big Pharma, we spoke about Big Pharma, me and Carla did, in episode 7, where we discussed the sort of more conspiracy sort of side of that. And in the newest Science But Simple, which is the debunking one, we debunk some of the things about Big Pharma. So it's got a mixed bag of the Science But Simple ones, and as I said, every episode of Genuine Chit Chat is generally different, but the next week's will be a Science But Simple. I can't remember precisely what we're doing it on. I think it's about climate change and sort of how climates work and that sort of thing. So that'll be released next week. And then I've got quite a few recordings lined up with some a variety of different people. So that should be quite interesting. I think I've basically said enough now. I think I've rambled on for a bit. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it, especially for this episode. And I'll talk to you guys next week.